Hello and welcome to the Sunday night breakdown. Daniel Routledge and Dave Forrester with you. We're in the playoffs and we've got 4 quarterfinals to go through this week. And well, first of all, I need to speak to the production company because it seems they just let anybody on color these days. How did that happen? This had nothing to do with me, full disclosure. How did that happen, Dave?
I don't really know. I think there may have been some form of error with the televideo people, because I got a message on Friday afternoon saying that they didn't have anybody do the games on Monday and could I help out? And I said yes. And
there you go.
There you go.
Did you enjoy it? That's the question.
The die was cast. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was like going back in time a little bit to when I was on the sidelines.
Okay.
Because
I thought you were going back to Eagles radio there.
No. Well, that would be very interesting. The production values were probably a little bit less impressive. No, it was just figuring out what's going on in real time as opposed to talking about it afterwards is always fun. Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it wrong. But hopefully, just try and provide a little bit of insight to what's going on. Away from the obvious stuff, So it was fun, yeah. I'm not sure I could do it permanently, but I enjoyed it.
Well, let's see if we can get some insight now that we've reflected on it. We'll do these by tie rather than by game. So we'll start off with the Leicester Riders Bristol Flyers games, and Leicester won 85-56 and then also 97-79 on Monday and Wednesday to really cruise through. There wasn't really much in this in the first half of the first leg. It was only 35-30 at halftime. It wasn't really until the third quarter that Leicester were able to pull away.
Yeah, Leicester hadn't obviously played for more than a week, and will have had an emotional drop off from winning the league, and you can't just immediately jump into an emotional pickup again. And Bristol did some things well in the first half, but the first 6 or 7 minutes of the game, they were very good. They got the ball to where they wanted it. They got Mockford coming off some curls. They defended reasonably well, albeit the screen and roll defense struggled with a bit. Delpesh really struggled in the middle, and Kapoulis had to bring in Edozie instead of Delpesh. But the problem was Edozie's defense was better, but then he blew 2 layups at the other end, so they couldn't get any kind of consistent defense in the first half, and Leicester were just a little bit off. And the difference between finishing first and finishing 8th is that you've got another notch or 2 to go up when you need it. And Leicester did that in the third quarter, and then they just asphyxiated Bristol slowly, methodically, and brutally. And Bristol kind of fell away bit by bit. It was a death by 1,000 cuts type of situation, and Leicester broke Bristol basically, as demonstrated by the way that the first half they kept Crandall in relative control, and then by the second half he was getting in the middle of the lane and being able to throw it off to the big guys, and they were just getting layups, and Bristol's defense just broke down.
Yeah, 17-2 run in 4 minutes in the third quarter had Leicester at 17 up, and then Mo Walker hit 9 in a row in the fourth quarter, and it was 78-49, and the 49 was as big a problem as the 78. They just couldn't find a way through Leicester. Interested to get your reflection on Walker, because obviously Ali Fraser out injured. Sounded from the interviews that Rob gave as if they're not expecting him to play again this season. So Walker, who's been out injured and they've been giving spotty minutes, suddenly becomes the bench unit center, and obviously he's very different to Ali.
Yeah, I mean, at his best, and I say at his best, I mean, I don't mean this in a bad way. I mean, not coming off 2 horrendous years of injury, he's a game-changing player in the league. Whether he can get back to that level is another, in such a short space of time, is another matter. What's interesting was that he is a guy that you dump the ball down to, or that the temptation is to dump the ball down to. But I thought Leicester were better in the Bristol game when they eschewed that and they went to Crandall in the screen and roll, and let Crandall draw him and give him the basketball, because Mo Walker isn't going to miss, layups. Once he gets a ball with 2 feet in the paint, he's going to score. So it'll be interesting to see what things they do differently with him. It's going to be an interesting matchup because he's coming off the bench for Leicester, and we've got Newcastle in the semi-final. And Maxwell's coming off the bench for Newcastle, so it's two seriously big bodies there. Whether what you don't want to do if you're Leicester is change the way you've been effective. In the Bristol first leg, they were 20 of 25 in the paint, the three bigs. That's unsustainable for any team because they're all layups. There's no way you can beat them if you give them that because it's all off penetration. These aren't tough post-ups over two or three guys. It's just a layup after a layup after a layup. And if they're able to maintain that and continue to go that way, then I've seen only positives. If, however, they decide, the lineups aren't quite right and they just end up throwing the ball down there to him, that can set your team off rhythm. He's played enough games now where I don't think Rob will let that happen. So I'm cautiously optimistic for them. They do benefit from him, but they lose Fraser. So, it's all right saying, we're going to be unbeatable now. We've got Walker. Well, yeah, but you've lost Fraser. Fraser's pretty good.
Yeah.
So the question is, what positive benefits do you get out of Walker that you wouldn't get out of Fraser? And that might be matchup dependent. Against Bristol with Edozie and Delpeche, the muscle is there and it's very useful. Against Newcastle with Maxwell, maybe you'd want to have Fraser, who's a little bit more kind of opens the floor a little bit, stretches the floor a little bit more, because Maxwell's one of the few guys in the league who's got a kind of a big enough body to bang with Walker. But I mean, it was a very encouraging. The encouraging thing was the way that Crandall was able to link up with him, and defensively he wasn't caught out.
Yeah, 16 and 6 off 7 of 8 shooting in the first leg, and he had 11 and 9 in the second leg, and some good minutes because the second leg, the Flyers led early on, but then Leicester had a 16-2 run late in the first half, so it meant that they didn't really need to play that second half at all, and they could give him some extended run.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, at the end of the third quarter in the first leg, it was like Bristol were kind of tottering on the ropes, and they were just about to be knocked out, and he came out and was the extra piece which allowed them to do that. The second leg, a bit of a non-event, I'm afraid. I don't think you take much from it because Leicester are playing properly, but they're not playing hard, if I can put it that way. They're not playing as hard as they can. They're not putting their foot to the metal. Bristol are kind of playing for pride a little bit, but their aura was up and down the whole two games. They went from jumping up and down and Lockett's flying around and making plays to blocking shots and stuff to basically being utterly passive and not having any degree of impact on. You couldn't work out what they were doing. So it was just a game waiting for Leicester to kind of decide whether they wanted to win it or not, I thought. And they're always going to want to win it because it's a win for the record, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And they did. So, it's what we said about, going back a while now, first for 8th, you fight to get into 8th, but ultimately you end up with a heck of a matchup because you're playing against a team who's got different levels to go to. And you're playing against them without your GB point guard. So really tough.
Let's go on to the second game on Monday and Wednesday. On Monday, it was 73-66, the Lions over Cheshire. And, the second leg was a rout, 95-60. The Lions won that one. Let's start off with the beginning of that first leg. And Justin Robinson came out. You could see he was on it right from the beginning. 3 3-pointers, 11 points in that first quarter. They open up a 21-10 lead early on.
Yeah, and this is where you have guys who've been in the league. You have to know your history. Justin Robinson played in the team that got knocked out in the first round not so long ago, and he has talked about it since publicly about how frustrated and upset he was that they didn't get to the final. And it's the other guys, particularly Liggins and Parker, they kind of are feeling their way into these playoffs, that type of thing. Justin Robinson's not. So Justin Robinson comes out and he plays aggressively. He makes shots and he just leads the group. Liggins wasn't quite right in this game. He was he was a little bit antsy as he was pointing at people. It was almost like this whole kind of playoff two-leg thing. It got to, maybe it was being back in Newcastle yet again because they've taken up residency on the quayside. I think this London.
Kept the Malmays on in business.
Kept the Malmays on in business, indeed. But he wasn't quite right, and because of that, and because he is the person that London take their primary inspiration from, they kind of go as he goes to a certain degree. Cheshire were able to hang around, and Cheshire played what was pretty close to a perfect game for them, given the resources, given the lineups that they had, in particular with the amount of disruption that they were able to create in the London offense and get their hands on balls and deflections, and Ross was all over the court basically. Because of that, there was no separation for London, and then they got a little bit.
Well, there were early in the second quarter. You just thought, oh, London are gonna. Liggins had made a couple of plays, and you thought they are gonna just cruise away with this. But credit to Knicks, they finished that first half really well. I think it was 18-5 in the last 5 minutes, and got, as you say, within touching distance, and then hung on in the second half. Never let them get too far away.
Well, they did, and that's because they held them to 73 in the game, and that's because they held, they got their deflections. London didn't shoot the ball great from the 3-point line, but they didn't get as many kind of clear, open looks as perhaps they're used to doing, and maybe a little bit antsy apart from Dirk Williams and Justin Robinson. They didn't shoot it particularly well, and you just felt that the tempo of the game was right for Cheshire. They only scored 66 in the game or something like that. So they didn't have to score the ball. It wasn't a question of somebody going mad and scoring the ball a lot. It was a question of just digging down defensively. And Carey did a good job in this game. He defended
when they had that small unit on as well. They were able to get steals and runbacks.
Yeah, and that was interesting because they didn't really do that much in the second leg. I thought they missed a trick there. Because Vince talked about it in the interview afterwards. It's tough when you've got two dominant centres, two full dominant centres, to have them both sitting down. But sometimes, there are margins of the game, there are periods of the game whereby, that's something you might like to do, because it takes the opposition out of their comfort zone if it makes them take one of their guys off the court. And if you're talking about playing against London, you really do want to try and throw some problems at them, because they have so many potential solutions that it's quite feasible that Vince will not necessarily find the right one straight away, because he's simply got so many players he can cycle through. And if you don't have that, that can give you maybe a 5 minute run, which can change a game. And in the playoffs, you're playing by 4 or 5 minutes. You're playing by units. You want the best. You want the unit on to win the next 4 or 5 minutes. And then I think at the end of the third quarter, they went to the two big lineup, Cheshire in the first leg, and they did okay. They got a couple of offensive rebounds and kind of just hung around. But then it came down to the end of the game, and unfortunately, the time that Cheshire played impacted their ability to finish the game.
Yeah, the interesting bit is they got back to, I think it was McCall hit a 3 with 4 minutes to go, put them up by a point. Robinson obviously hit the deck, limps out of the game. Dangakodo comes in, having not played in the game to that point, and you sort of think, oh, this is a real chance. But I mean, credit to Jules, he comes out cold, having sat and watched the game for 36 minutes and makes a couple of big plays for them.
Yeah, more than credit. I mean, it's phenomenal. To have that degree of professionalism. And the thing with Jules Dangakodo is that this year he's kind of, amongst all the kind of second tier London players who haven't really played that much, he's the one who's really stepped and made you notice him when he has. The guys have all been there, and at times have been hot and cold, and that's Spencer and Ikenwin and Lockhart. They've all kind of, and some of the backup centers have all been around. They've all contributed. But Akodo is the one guy who you've thought, actually, this guy could probably play a lot more somewhere else. And the way that he's playing. And part of that is because he was always recognized as a relatively shaky 3-point shooter. You have to check the numbers for last year, but certainly we weren't running him off the 3-point line when he played at the at the Royals. And this year he's up at 42%. You know, and obviously you're getting more open shots because he's not necessarily having to create as much off the dribble. They've got multiple ball handlers in the swinging the ball and getting them shots. But to come in and to make a three, to get an assist, to play some defense at that point, it's a fantastic thing for a coach to have a guy who can do that. He wouldn't have gotten the game if Robertson had been injured.
No.
He would have been sat there. He wouldn't have been in the game. And for him to stay ready in that way, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him next year, because he needs to be playing more than 9 or 10 minutes a game for a team.
So a minute to go in the game, it's 66-65 to London, and you think Cheshire, could still win the game, but what they can't allow London to do is make a couple of plays in the last minute. And what happens is Parker hits a 4-point play, Ross goes 1 for 3 from the 3-point line, and then Williams on the buzzer, and all of that sort of effort and momentum just deflates away for Cheshire, losing by 7 in a game they could have won.
Yeah, and then within 2 minutes of the second leg, it's 15, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's partly because of that. Yeah, I mean, to be absolutely fair, they didn't blow much in that time. Ross missed a couple of foul shots, but Ross has played 38 minutes. Parker makes a tough shot. Brian Manning's coming at him, and they didn't blow a coverage. He just made a tough shot, and it kind of bobbled around a bit before it went in. And then Williams on the buzzer close to the buzzer, just makes a ridiculous shot. It's just nothing. You can't. That's just talent. That's just offensive players with talent making a difference in the game. They couldn't have defended that better. He caught the ball on the logo, and they had a man flying out at him. So yeah, momentum in a two-legged game. The last 5 minutes can make a difference, particularly when it's kind of the plucky underdog who drops away. Because you almost, if you're London, you're thinking that's their best shot. If you're Cheshire, you're thinking that might have been our best shot. We're going to give it another one. But London know that in that game they shot like 9 of 30 something from the 3-point line or something like that. And they're thinking, well, this isn't the way we shoot. And as it demonstrated in the second leg, they had another level to go to as well.
Yeah, well, it was 11 of 30 they shot.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about it was they were 11 of their first 15 in the second leg.
Yeah, and the thing about the second leg was, yes, London went off. They went off on a tear at the beginning.
13-2 start they had in the first round.
Cheshire were defending them like they were a team that had made 11 out of 32 threes in the first game. That was the way they shoot. And sometimes you have to realise, especially in a quick two-legged turnaround game, it's not just what you did well and what you didn't do well. It's what the opposition didn't do well and where you got lucky. Because in any basketball game, you do get lucky. The opposition miss shots, you make mistakes, and you get away with stuff which can be hidden by the score, can be hidden by plays that are made, but it doesn't change the process of what's gone on. Now, when you play teams twice in a row like that, it might just be a little bit level of focus because it's a second leg as opposed to a first leg, and you give up the same shot. And in fact, from my perspective, the defense actually wasn't as good in the second leg. Maybe they were worn down a bit. You give up the same type of shots, then suddenly they are flying in from everywhere. And then after that run, Ben's in his box of tricks trying to find something that works. And at that, he went to Lull and Brian Amming very early in that game to try and, change the tempo or something. But that just meant there was even more space for the shooters. Because then Parker got going, and Ikinwin came in and made 3 threes. He's playing as a stretch 4. Yeah. But if he's being guarded by Lull or Brian Amming, he's going to get those shots. Parker the same, Ward Hibbert the same. So the 3-point shooting kind of became almost a self-fulfilling prophecy for them, because the only thing that Cheshire thought that they were able to do was to go bigger, to try and bully them. But unfortunately, that was the game was gone by then. And I think you have to feel a little bit for Cheshire, because the circumstances of the tie don't really assist them. 2 legs over 3 days against as stacked a team as London, with the limited numbers of bodies, the healthy bodies that they have, is tough. If it had been maybe a leg a week apart, you think the better opportunity, or even better, if it had been a 3-game series, even better, because then they could have easily nicked the first one.
Yeah.
you know, and then suddenly the whole thing is different because you're not thinking, well, this game's done after probably 15 minutes of the second leg.
Yeah.
Time's done.
It was 50-23 after 15
Well,
minutes.
okay,
Yeah,
we're probably
so
after
that,
10 minutes. 10 minutes of the second leg, it's done. And that's what happens. You know, this is kind of the downside of the two-legged thing. I don't actually like it for the playoffs. I always prefer three games for the playoffs. It's that one bad quarter can change seven. Instead of in a three-game series, one bad quarter changes four, but then you come back and you got another game, you know, so you have another opportunity. And I think they given the resources disparity and what had gone on all season, you know, they can be pretty chuffed with that, the fact that they got to seventh. They've had some players who've shown out this year who I think have done themselves good. Carey in particular. Ross obviously is high-level point guard in a league of high-level point guards. We know what McCall is. And the two big guys have shown that they can contribute as well. I'm not necessarily sure they're perfect for the same team, though.
Yeah, peaked at 84-36, that one. So, as you say, well over.
Glad you were commentating and watching. Yeah. I'm not sure I was.
Yeah. So let's go on to the Tuesday and Thursday playoff quarterfinals. Newcastle 79, Sheffield 77 in the first leg, and that basket was the difference in the end because they were 81-81 at the end of 40 minutes in the second leg. And well, if we go back to the first leg,
does that count as a 51-49 Newcastle prediction? By the way,
I think it does. I think it does. Yeah.
Too. I'm not wishing to take any unnecessary plaudits, but
take them where they are there.
I'll not only take them, I will claim them.
So let's go back to the first half of the first leg. Not a great deal between them until the last 4 minutes of that first half, where Eagles had a 17-6 run to take it from a 1-point game to a 14-point game, with Edwards and Gordon providing the bulk of it.
Yeah, I mean, the game was the legitimate game of two halves. Like every game is a game of two halves, but I think the phrase is meant to suggest two different halves, and it was, because even though the game was close in the first half, the momentum was entirely in Newcastle's favour. Sheffield were making difficult shots. Newcastle were getting comfortable shots in rhythm. They were knocking them down. Fletcher was looking for his 3-point shot, which is always an indication. And Defoe was getting to the rim, and he got to the rim 5 or 6 times, and that's not acceptable for Sheffield, because that's not the way they play defense. To give up 10 points on layups to Defoe is just the amount of times he's played against them is unsustainable for them. And as such, Newcastle had 52 points by the half. Sheffield kind of hung around only because they made some tough shots. And it could have been a little bit worse for them, because I don't think they were there. And then you can set your watch to the time that Sheffield come out of the dressing rooms at half time this season at the arena, because it's normally about a minute and a half to go after Tebas had to give them a telling off. And it's happened 3 times. It's the same. And their energy levels picked up substantially in the second and the third quarter, and particularly in transition. And Newcastle's kind of Jekyll and Hyde persona came in as well, because it wasn't that they weren't scoring, but it was that when they weren't finishing, they weren't getting back. And when they're not getting back, that gave Rotino 2 or 3 layups in transition. Coke got a layup in transition. And suddenly the easy points that you need to that Sheffield do actually rely on. They're not a particularly potent offensive half-court team. They're solid, but they're not. But getting those points in transition, that changes the momentum of the game, and that changes the manner in which Sheffield are playing defense. And suddenly the basket gets very, very small for Newcastle, and they're struggling to score. And you add in the fact that the Newcastle guards are always playing lots of minutes, which makes you worry about the amount of pressure that they have placed on them to create in the fourth quarter. And that if nobody else is stepping up to score, they have difficulties. And I think in the fourth quarter, I don't think anybody apart from Fletcher or Defoe scored. I might be wrong.
Yeah. It was, in some ways, it was a microcosm of both seasons. I mean, as you say, Sheffield are the team, they would spot you a 10, 12-point lead and see if they can get it all back in the second half. And we've seen this movie play out before for Newcastle, where they've had a good lead. It reached 17 early in the third quarter, and teams reel them back in. They've not always got all the way back, but this one was Sharks with the last score of the third quarter and then the first 9 of the fourth. And it's a 2-point game going with 7 minutes to go.
Yeah, that was a story which is played out for Newcastle quite regularly. The game they lost against Manchester, they did exactly the same. Manchester went to run the game, I think, against Surrey the following week was fairly similar. There was runs at the beginning of the fourth quarter where what appeared to be a relatively comfortable lead suddenly becomes twisty. And I actually think it was significant last 4 minutes of this first leg, because where I think you would have got to a point, and you can correct us on this, but where Sheffield would have probably took the lead with about 4 minutes to go, 4 or 5 minutes to go, and they had all the momentum. And at that point, I think if I'm Sheffield, I'm looking to go up 6 or 8.
Yeah,
but Newcastle can't score. Newcastle had 9 points in the fourth quarter, and it wasn't particularly well played basketball at the end, but there was enough kind of grind in it from both teams defensively, whereby Newcastle were able to stop that momentum before it kind of, ran them over and just scrape out a lead at the end. And I think that was an important lead. It was obviously important lead, 2 points. It was important not because it was a 2-point lead. It was important because of what it wasn't.
Yeah, they weren't behind.
It could have been 6 or 8 the other way comfortably. And if it had been 6 or 8 to Newcastle, I don't think anyone would have cared, because Sheffield had been that all season coming from behind.
Yeah.
But if it had been 6 to 8 from Sheffield after Newcastle had been 16 or 17 up, then that becomes a psychological thing, because that'll be the 3rd time Sheffield have done it this season. So the fact that they were able to, Newcastle were able to hold on, and I think there were just a couple of stops at the end. There was no basket scored.
Yeah, there wasn't.
What was critical, I think.
Yeah, and then Sheffield, having finished the first leg well, started the second leg really well. Rotino hit a couple of early threes. They got out to a 9-point lead, and you were talking about momentum. They certainly had it there going into the first quarter of that.
Yeah, I think they had confidence, certainly, but also the Newcastle's defense in the first quarter wasn't particularly good. In fact, Sheffield's defense wasn't particularly good. Both teams scored. It's just Newcastle missed a couple more shots than Sheffield did. And then from memory, yes, some threes, but also Nichols got going early. Nichols is bellwether for them. And
didn't miss a shot in the whole game. No.
And this is kind of something that slightly concerns me for Newcastle going forward, that in the first leg, Helmsley didn't miss a shot. He's a main guy for them. Second leg, Nichols didn't miss a shot. He's another main guy. These are guys that you probably want to, pretty high up on your scouting reports to take out of what they're doing, and they're both going 9 of 9. So they're going to have to look at that going forward against Leicester.
It was Lillard in the first leg who didn't miss a shot. Helmsley was 10 of 13.
Sorry, my bad. Yeah, Lillard.
Yeah.
So it became another, almost a reverse situation, whereby you felt Newcastle creaking.
Yeah.
But I think what stopped them creaking primarily was Gordon. Fletcher struggled offensively, but still came up with his assists and his defense. But Gordon, every time they needed a basket, he found a way, whether it was on a drive, whether it was in the post, whether it was from the 3-point line. He became a big game player, and he's shown that this year.
He did, and he was part, along with Maxwell, of a 10-0 run in the second quarter that got it back to 2. But Sheffield came back with the next 9 points, and then they managed to keep them just about at bay, and it was one of those things where you were thinking they've got everything in this game. What have Newcastle got left? And then if we spin it forward to the start of the fourth quarter, Eagles had got it back to 4 late in the third, and then Sheffield 10 in a row. That tuck 3-pointer was about 2.5 minutes into the fourth quarter. It's a 14-point game. He's pointing at me and Rowe. Everything is going their way, and you think this is it here. Sheffield are going to win.
Yeah, that beginning of those minutes, kind of at the end of the third quarter and the beginning of the fourth quarter, again hurt Newcastle. And as I say, it's happened regularly. One point they had a lineup with, I think, Fletcher, Edwards, Sayers, Fluger, and Adenikin. And I don't even know if that line had been played together because the bigs were in foul trouble. And Sheffield kind of broached the quarter and went round it. And as you say, they made a ton of shots. And more importantly, they started creating stuff off their defense. But the 7 minutes that they played before the last 7 minutes were totally different to the subsequent 7 minutes they played, because watching it back, they basically imploded in relation to their decision making at that time. And the people who needed to touch the ball really didn't touch the ball. Wouldn't have Newcastle gained something, got a bit of momentum with getting the ball down to Maxwell down low. And this is why I think as a scorer off the bench, he becomes a focal point. You can throw the ball to him because he's 6'10", nice touch. And he's not necessarily playing against the opposition starters the same way that he was, where he's being exposed a little bit defensively. So they went to him, and the points he scored kept them in it, because obviously even if you're getting stops, you're down 12 or 14, you've got to be scoring the ball. And once it got to kind of 6 or 8, I think certainly some of the Sheffield guys got tight. Lillard, I don't know if it was a two-legged thing, I don't know, being a rookie, whatever. He made 3 or 4 poor plays down the stretch. He drove, he didn't get any looking for contact, layups. Also Helmsley hardly touched the ball. And Helmsley was kind of the guy that you would expect to have the ball in his hands, and indeed he was right at the end. So they turned the ball over more and they struggled to score. That was the major difficulty that they had, and that allowed Newcastle to get a little bit of momentum, which meant that when Sheffield did make a shot, Newcastle were in the game. So I think it came down to Ritino. I think
you mentioned Maxwell, Edwards as well in that they got it back to 6. Then Sayers hits a 3, and Maxwell scores, and it's a 3-point game with 3 minutes to play. And again, you're thinking, wow, Sheffield are wobbling here, but Ritino hits an important 3 to make it a 6-point game.
Yeah, but if that play, because they ran a nice play for that, and to getting the ball at the top, and Sayers went the wrong side around the screen and nailed it, and Ritino nailed it. If that play had been 2 or 3 minutes earlier, different game, because at that point Newcastle were in the game. It was a 3-point game in the leg. It was 1-point game in the tie. So that's just part of the coming and going. Where Sheffield needed to put that game away was at the 7-minute mark.
Yeah.
Between the 7-minute mark and the 4-minute mark. That was it. That's why they needed those minutes. And they had some guys off the court at that time. They had Nick Lewis running the point, which doesn't necessarily add to their fluency when he's running the point. And they just struggled at that point. So Ritino makes that 3, but what happens then is that the juices are flowing, so they go straight down the other end, and Gordon pops out on the weak side and steps up and drains it. And at this point, it's anybody's game. The emotions are flowing, and it comes down to who executes at the end. And Newcastle did that a little bit better than Sheffield.
Yeah, so Gordon hits that 3. Also, then followed that up with a 2, and it actually put.
In transition, he went around his back in transition, and he made a tough play. Yeah, off a steal.
A minute 20 to go, and they're actually now back in front on the aggregate, and then it's Edwards with a free throw with 30 seconds to go, and Sheffield at that point have to score with what looks like their final offense of the game just to tie it.
Yeah, but even just going back a little bit on that, Gordon made that layup because Fletcher Fletcher tipped the pass, and they got a steal, and he scored in transition. Next time down, Nichols gets a 5-second call.
Yeah.
So they don't get a shot. They're not getting shots at the basket.
Yeah.
And the next time, and then Edwards made foul shots, but that was off 3 offensive rebounds.
Yeah.
And Newcastle missed 2 shots and made, got 2 offensive rebounds. So these are all critical things at the end of basketball games. You can't turn the ball over to allow Fletcher to deflect the pass. You can't get a 5-second call at that point in the game, and you certainly can't give up 2 or 3 offensive rebounds. And against that, they were still in the game because they're down by 1, and finally they get the ball to Helmsley.
Yeah,
and he
makes a play. I mean, he makes a play like there's nothing on it. It was just so laid back, casual, easy for him.
hard right-hand dribble, slow down, separation, behind the back, 8 feet, 10 feet runner. Edwards has no shot at defending that. He defended it all right, but it was just a scorer making a play. And you wonder, apart from that in the Retino 3, where had that been? So that then brings us to the Eagles have a timeout, and the it's basically all about Fletcher. What happens is Sheffield, I think, could have denied him the ball. If you watch the play, he starts well away from the basketball, comes up from the top, and Helmsley kind of just stops in case he's switching on the screen, and allows Fletcher to catch the ball. And what Fletcher does then is he manipulates the defense. He goes to his right, so in order that he can come back left, off a kind of a half screen from Gordon, and they switch. So they don't. Helmsley doesn't go over. Nichols is guarding Fletcher. Well, Nichols hasn't really guarded Fletcher the whole game, and what that allows Fletcher to do is a little hesitation dribble to get to his left to the middle, and you've seen that runner 100,000 times. But what Fletcher knows is that because of the switch, Gordon is on Helmsley, and Gordon's in front of Helmsley. The only help Sheffield have is Coke, because everybody else is on the weak side, so they're miles away. So Coke comes across to the middle to disrupt the shot. But because Gordon is on Helmsley's on Gordon's back, Fletcher knows that all he's got to do is throw it up there. And I initially thought it was a shot when I watched it. But watching it back, it's not. It's a pass.
You think that was a pass? I was sure it was a shot.
No, it was definitely a pass. 2 reasons. One, if it had been deflected, it wasn't. One, he doesn't miss from 8 feet by that much. But secondly, it wasn't that it was short. It was short to the wide. It was short, 2 feet to the side of the rim. And you got to watch it from behind the basket, from on the angle. You didn't really have a great angle, because I thought it was a shot on the angle you guys had to start with. But that was a pass. And he threw that pass because he knew that Gordon had switched on the screen, and Gordon finished it. So that was all about Fletcher. And then second time this season, Bennett Cook had a shot at the rim at the end off an inbounds. He probably could have done with 1.1 seconds instead of 0.7 seconds.
Yeah.
Because he just kind of put it up there before he had his body quite an angle. If you're 6'10", that's tough, because you're not used to shooting the ball like that. You're used to getting into your rhythm, getting your steps right and putting it up. But they ran a nice play. They ran Helmsley across the baseline. They had Lewis throwing the ball in, so Helmsley was a threat. Retino come up the top and spin around the base, spin around for the lob, and then Cook slipped to the rim, and he got Defoe. He got half a step on Defoe, which allowed him to catch the ball. Eagles weren't pressuring the ball on the sideline, so he had the ability to throw that pass, and he just didn't quite catch it with his body the right way. He wasn't facing. He thought it to kind of turn and lay it in. He had to catch it and then turn, and because he knew the time, he put it up too quick. And couldn't make it. But it was a great look. Yeah,
it wasn't easy, but they wouldn't have got anything much better than that, I don't think.
No, absolutely not. The only thing is that you're worried that if you're Newcastle, you're still worried that they get a 3 off.
Yeah.
Or even worse, a 3 on a foul. So I think you're kind of denying Retino and you're denying Helmsley to not let them get that. And it has to be Coke or Nichols shooting the basketball. So yeah, I mean, I think you're happy with that. Normally with that lob play, it was a little variation on the lob play, because we've seen it a few times this season. Normally the big spins off the back for the lob dunk it. He actually slipped him. It was Retino spun off the back, and it was Cook actually used that to slip in the front of Defoe, which was a nice little kind of switch on it. But it was a skin of the teeth game. Either way, both teams I think showed significant fallibilities. But eventually, the last 7 minutes, I think Sheffield's lack of experience. We also missed out that Lillard's foul. Lillard's foul was a ridiculous foul. With 27 seconds to go, with 13 on the shot clock, down by 1. Just and they're up by 1 in the game, but they're down by 1, and their heads are they're down by 1 in the game, and you just get the feeling that the whole 2-legged thing kind of really threw him.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure whether the people on the sideline were shouting foul, don't foul, whatever.
Yeah.
It was just a degree of confusion about that.
It wasn't a good foul.
It wasn't a good foul. They get a stop and a score, they win.
Yeah.
You know, and then the way that Helmsley went and scored the ball, you can't say that they would have got a score.
Yeah.
You know, so the little things matter in the playoffs. Pressure, whether a team cracks, whether your mindset is you're attuned to what's going on, whether you're able to get the ball to where it needs to go to, and ultimately whether you keep your head. And you know, Sheffield probably outplayed Newcastle for 5/8 of that tie. But ultimately they couldn't clean it up in the last 7 minutes.
No, so Newcastle through. Let's go to the last of the quarterfinals. Plymouth Raiders 84, Worcester Wolves 82 in the first leg, and 96-81 to the Raiders in the second leg. And well, we were all sat there thinking, and I think Matt Newby, judging by his post-game press conference, heard everybody going, well, Worcester got no chance here, have they, with no Parks, and Anderson hasn't played for months, and all of this. And they came out swinging in that first quarter, McSwiggan with 8 points, Burns dunking everything. They were 18-4 up after 5 minutes.
Yeah, never underestimate the no one believes in us shtick. God, we used it so many times. And I almost think that one at times doing various coaches a favor us to doing these podcasts because it means they can point at some, because the coaches are far too smart to start winding the opposition up beforehand. But it does mean if any of them do listen, and I don't know, that they can point the finger and say they don't think you're very good, they don't think you can win, blah 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 blah. And no, I mean they did. They absolutely came out aggressive. They came out motivated. McSwiggan got going early. Burns looked like a different type of player to the one that we've seen. You know, he's looked like a relatively cerebral guy. You know, taking what the defense gave him when he just came out and he was a force of nature. He was a bit aggressive, attacking the rim, dunking on people. Jordan Williams was getting people the basketball where they needed to go. And the difficulty Plymouth had is that their starting five isn't the best five. And so what you had was the most cohesive five for Worcester starting the game against a starting five for Plymouth, which isn't its most cohesive five. And Porter Button got injured after 5 minutes. Ocherobia played 4 minutes in the first half, and that was it. Will Neighbour was not ready to play at the beginning of the game because he caught the ball in the post a couple of times and he threw it away instead of just making the moves he's been making all year. And PJ sat him down very quickly. So that run came with, as I say, a less effective 5-1 for Plymouth and Worcester's most effective 5-1. Fortunately, you can't play them the whole game. And for Worcester's perspective, and what happened then is that the lineup that PJ found of Dusha, McGill, Morsell, Hamilton, and Beastie, that lineup, which was supplemented by Neighbour a little bit in the second half, that lineup is, at this point in time, unsolved in this league. Nobody has solved that lineup offensively. No one has worked out what you're meant to take away, how you're meant to defend them. And the advantage they have is that they're playing against Worcester's kind of Anderson just coming in fresh. Wilkins played, but really didn't have any impact. Played a few minutes. Elan didn't play because I think Matt Newby must have been worried about the size of Plymouth on the wing. Seemed to be matched up with Morsell, which would have been a tough matchup. And Worcester's bigs obviously, you know, getting a little bit tired as well. So that allows Plymouth, with that 5-out lineup that I'm talking about, and with Beastie basically providing a tremendous defensive anchor in the middle and getting their offensive rebounds and doing all the little things, that allows them to fly back at Worcester, and suddenly we're back to where we started at half time.
Yeah, Beastie was fantastic all game. The flurry of threes it was in the second quarter, and it's a 15-3 run to cut it back to 3. And this was quite a physical and a bit chippy at times. This game.
Yeah. But the flurry of threes comes because of their lineup, because they've got 5 3-point shooters on the court. 2 of them were LVC Dusha, where they forgot he's a 37% 3-point shooter and a 37% 2-point shooter. You know, they just let him shoot 2 threes. Then there is Beastie, Hamilton, and McGill gets going because Dusha's playing. So that's the lineup. They are getting shots that they're not getting when they've got McGill, Porter, Bunton, Ocherobia, and Marcel and people like that. Now that impacts, so then they get flying and go the other way. But yeah, then there was a lot of talking in the first half, and the refs kind of just, I don't think they wanted to impose too much too early. With it being a playoff game, you don't have, you don't be throwing texts around in the first half as much. But we both, I think, could see what was coming. And because Plymouth in particular play, very much on the edge of the refs. There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. It's just the identity that a team takes over the course of the season. They're a team which is physical. They challenge the referees to make calls. They question calls when they don't get them, respectfully, most of the time. But they do play very much on the edge, and there's a degree of physical intimidation about them. Again, a good degree of physical intimidation, but primarily, Hamilton is a presence on the court, or Cherubia is a quiet presence on the court, but he's there. And obviously they had Ebe, and Ebe was a giant presence on the court. But even then, you're looking at McGill, who likes to talk, Marcel, who's quite emotional. There's a lot of pieces. There's a lot of moving parts in relation to that.
And the bench as well is the loudest bench in the league, so they're up and jumping up and down.
Yeah, they weren't the loudest bench in the league in the first quarter.
Well, maybe not.
I'm always skeptical, a little bit. I hear what you're saying, and they are. Yeah. I'm always a little bit skeptical about having a loud bench when, if you're getting beat by 20, no one's happy. What they do, I think, is that they enjoy each other's successes.
Yeah, they do.
Notably. But a little bit of fool's gold with that. I'm not. It's important, but there's a very fine line between an emotional and helpful bench and being front runners.
Yeah.
If you've not played the whole game and you're up dancing, celebrating people's shots and all that stuff, well, I'm looking at you thinking maybe you should be doing some of this work as well. That's just But anyway, that's picky.
So let's get back to the game. Early in the third quarter, the Wolves got back in front. They reached 11 at one stage, but McGill, Marcel, Hamilton helped cut it back to 66-70 at the end of the third, and then the big moment in the game, really, in the fourth quarter, middle of the fourth quarter, Hamilton didn't get a call. He's talking to the referee, Beastie, who, it wasn't the first time in the game he did this, by the way, but Beastie gets in there, walks him all the way away from the referee, trying to protect him, but he obviously said something down court because he gets a technical from about 50 feet away. And then was it the next play or the play after, him and Jordan Williams bumping each other on the way down, a lot of chatter going on, referee double technical, Hamilton's out of the game with 4 or 5 minutes to go.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you play on the edge, every so often you're going to fall off the edge. And I think they did. I think he did. I think again, it's a shame it was a first leg because ultimately there was no jeopardy at the end of the game. To really, and that's unfortunate. I didn't see the double text, so I don't know. I'm not going to slate Ashley Hampton and say he was wrong to do that, but I don't know if he did anything wrong. He maybe did, maybe he didn't. Maybe they're just talking to each other. But the reality was that it was coming from somebody. Whether it was going to be him or whether it was going to be somebody else. And they did have a bit of a moan about the refereeing afterwards. But to be honest, the calls that were made, there was more calls on Plymouth than there were on Worcester. Absolutely. But Plymouth are playing more physically than Worcester. That was my view of the game. And all you can do is go back across the game and think of the the various calls that were made, and were there any calls that were made and you thought, oh, they blew that one, oh, they got that one wrong. And there weren't many. There's not many that you actually think, oh, not sure about that. So I think that game's a useful lesson for Plymouth because PJ mentioned in his interview afterwards about controlling emotions. And you don't want to tell your team to stop being what they are. They have to be what they are. They have to be the best version of themselves. But they have to see it for themselves that there are times when you can take that one step too far, lose control of your emotions, and that can impact you in a big game. And hopefully they'll take that forward to the semi-finals. So yeah, it should have made a difference, but it really didn't because I think Will Neighbour was ready to play at that point, and Beastie was obviously the best player on the court, and McGill was at that point whereby he was ready to take over as well.
Well, he did take over. He got the 6 points. I think there was one basket before the ejection, but two more after it, and then Morcell got the next 5. And from being down and having seen Hamilton leave the game, they're now 4 up with a couple of minutes to play, and they've got the talent on the court and the way they were playing to be able to see that over the line.
Yeah, I mean, Worcester did have a couple of shots, but Worcester, Anderson shot the ball a lot in that game, and it's a slight difficult dynamic for a team when you've got a player who's been gone 7 weeks, and all the other guys have been going through the kind of the trenches, and they've been playing game after game after game and wearing themselves down, and he's been sitting there, and then suddenly he comes back in, and they actually kind of need him on the court, but also he's displacing somebody who's done all that work. And I'm not necessarily sure that they were. I don't think it wasn't that they weren't together. But I'm not sure that they were entirely as together as they would have been if he played 3 or 4 games before the end of the season. And I think that was something that they lost. Now, it also meant that Matt had to continually juggle his guards to find out which ones he was going to be playing, who he needed to play and who he didn't need to play. And they're a flow team, and once Plymouth got into them, their flow slowed down. They struggled to score the ball. McSwiggan didn't score the ball much in the second half, and I think it was on the bench at the end. And they kind of hung on. But they would have hung on with a degree of positivity that, no, we can play with these guys.
Yeah. And going into the second leg, it was a similar story, really. They came out first 5 minutes. They got up 13 to 4 and in a good spot at that point.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And again, there was another different starting lineup for Plymouth. Because this time they started Beastie at the 3. Yeah. It was started because Porter Button was injured. So it was McGill, Morcell, Beastie at the 3, Hamilton and Ocharobia. And again, that's probably not a lineup that's played much, if at all, this year. Yeah. And it struggled. And, these games aren't games of lineups. They're games of 5-minute periods at a time. Have you got a lineup on that's going to take advantage? And again, it was when Dusha comes in and McGill isn't kind of dribbling around and then jacking up 20-footers, but McGill is then in attack mode. Ocharobia goes out of the basketball game and they get another shooter in the game. And the opposition have to work out how are they going to defend them? Are they going to? You can't defend McGill or Morcell one-on-one on the wing because they're good enough to both make shots and get to the rim on basically anybody in this league. So you have to have a spare defender. You have to have a help defender somewhere. But where does that help defender come from? Can't come from Will Neighbour. Will Neighbour has to be defended like he's a 6'2" shooting guard on the perimeter. You can't let him. You can't do that because that's death. He will make shots time and time again. But that leaves you with Ashley Hamilton. But if Ashley Hamilton's stepping on the 3-point line, are you really going to help a long way off him? Because Ashley Hamilton's got the nous and the understanding of the game to know that these guys aren't really guarding me. I'm just step up and knock down these shots, which leaves LVC. But we know that LVC's catch and shoot is excellent. So no one's figured out that lineup yet. And I've got a couple. I mean, there's a couple of ways. I think you would probably you'd have to look at the numbers. I think what you would live with would be Ashley shooting threes. What you would live with was LVC, sagging a little bit off LVC and then getting out to him because he's not normally a fast catching shooter. But this ability that they have when they've got their 2 shooters in the front court and they have McGill and Morcell on the wings, it's offensively it's dynamite. And again, it broke the game open both in the second quarter and in the beginning of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, they had a 12-0 run in the second quarter and an 11-0 run at the beginning of the fourth quarter. In between, the closest that Worcester had got it was 4 points. But you always felt that Plymouth were going to at some point land the knockout blow.
Yeah, just that ability to get easy points in the playoffs. McGill, he's a combo guard. He's probably in the higher league in Greece where he played. I imagine he plays a point guard because he's not big. But in this league, as a scoring guard, he's dynamite because you can see his mindset change. You see his skill set, and that's what Dusha brings about. I thought it was a bit. I was surprised Worcester didn't call a timeout to begin the fourth quarter. They had, they used 2 timeouts in the last minute, 15 seconds of the game, and they were down by 20. I thought that the game was being played at the beginning of the fourth quarter when they went on that run, and I also think Worcester kind of ran out of gas. without Parks, without that extra big guy. And, Elan came in like for the first time in the tie with 3 minutes to go in the third quarter. And, it's a hell of an ask to get something from him at that point. And Kimball, up until the kind of the dying embers of the game, really wasn't a factor. And every time they've beaten a good team this year, Kimball's stepped up.
Yeah.
Kimball stepped up and made shots. And without him, it was just a little bit too much. So congratulations to Plymouth. I think they absolutely deserved it.
Yeah.
And as I say, they've got this killer lineup at the moment, which it will be really interesting to see if London can defend.
Just before we go on to the two semi-finals, just wanted a word about the WBBL, because it had this incredible run by the Newcastle Eagles. I mean, it was a phenomenal performance to defeat Leicester in the quarter-final, and they celebrated it like it was their final. And you kind of thought, yeah, they've done that really well, but they're not going to beat Sevenoaks, who've won the last three playoffs. Were almost undefeated for a second time in the league campaign, lost right at the end to Leicester, and they come out and just shoot the ball like you wouldn't believe in that game, and made big shots and knock out Sevenoaks it's the best run in WBBL playoff history. And to be honest with you, it stands up there with anything anywhere. Number 7 seed making it to the final is incredible.
Absolutely. I think the lesson I took from it is chemistry. And it's not chemistry in relation to people liking each other, because everybody says that they like each other. Everybody, that's fine. It's the fact that Chris Button basically had 5 players, and then Milliots playing a few minutes as a kind of a spot player for someone in foul trouble. And of those 5 players, only one is probably not a guard. Abby Lowe was playing the 4, but basically Abby Lowe is a guard.
Yeah.
So those players have a comfort level with each other.
Yeah.
And they're not being swapped in and out with coaches trying different lineups. And it's obviously a disaster if you get to a point whereby one of them goes down, or if they're not working well together, or if they're mismatched. But when they're actually matched up, they know exactly what they are. They know how they're going to win. They know they've got to shoot threes. Rachel Bland knows that she can't just stand there and pass the ball. She has to shoot the 3. So she makes 5 of them.
Yeah.
Now, if she was playing with a deeper team, which she has done for most of her career, it's unlikely that she'd be putting up as many shots.
Yeah.
And it's unlikely that she'd be having the impact that she was.
5 for 8, to be fair. She didn't put that many up. She shot very well.
But you heard Len Bush afterwards.
Yeah.
Len Bush afterwards, he pointed that out.
Yeah.
And that comes down to, being aware of what your responsibilities are, and aware of the fact that it's you, it's nobody else. It's on you. Yeah. You're going to win, you're going to lose, you're going to have fun. You've got nothing to worry about, nothing to be scared of. And they get their shots. They've got a system which appears to put the players in the best position to get shots. So you've got Abby Lowe attacking from the top, and you've got Gorell making plays everywhere, and McVicker's a bit of a late shot clock killer from what I can see. And it's a one game, so Sevenoaks have like gone 2 years without lost a game, or something like that. So, anything can happen in one game, and anything can happen in one half, which is basically what it was, which was that Newcastle made a ton of threes. So this isn't, they're not a better, I don't think they're a better team than Sevenoaks.
No.
But, in certain circumstances, lightning can strike. We've been there in the BBL before. You saw it with Leicester and Billy Mims going back 20 years. Lightning can strike when you get the right people in the right place at the right time with the right motivation, and a kind of a fearless environment, a fearless attitude, which is, if I shoot this shot, if I miss, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And they had some guts at the end.
Yeah, they did.
They made some shots. McVicker made a 3 with a minute to go, just like in the last game Lowe made plays. So I'm delighted for them. Obviously, you can probably tell I did watch the game. I haven't watched all the WBBL games, but I watched quite a few of them. But success in the playoffs always comes down to togetherness, and always comes down to lineups. And they've found a lineup which is a tough cover for everybody else, because it's not a lineup anybody else has seen in the league this year. As I say, it's got Abby Lowe playing basically the 4, which is She can shoot the three, or she can take any four off the dribble. So it causes other teams matchup problems. So congratulations to them.
Be interesting to see how they go, because obviously London have quite a lot of depth in the and many different lineups to throw. But
it becomes a coaching game. It really does. A coaching game for Mark Clark as opposed to Chris Button, because Chris Button, it's relatively straightforward. I mean, he might have the one of the injured players back by then, but even then he's not going to change much.
No.
Whereas Mark's going to have to look at this and think, well, do we try and kind of dominate them inside, or do we match up with them on the perimeter? And how do we match up with all their guards, and that can throw people off because it throws them off on normal rotation. So that kind of
because you kind of think Rodriguez gets in foul trouble. That's the only big they've got in the lineup. So what can they do? But that happened, and they rode it out.
Yes, before my time of being, I was watching on Sky, but the amount of times over the years I've heard about the famous five from Birmingham. In 1998, and then they went
Fab
and
Five.
Fab Five. Well, he was part of it. I don't think he was the main part of it. I think Nigel probably takes a lot of credit. If you're watching Nigel, because I know Fab isn't. But you don't need. You need to have guys people who know and trust each other just as much as you need to have a massive bench. Massive bench gets you through the season. It doesn't necessarily, the big games, it's the players on the court who win them for you, and there's only 200 minutes to go around.
Well, well worth watching for anybody at home, because you've got Alison Garrell, who had a triple-double in the semi-final, and Kennedy Leonard, who almost had a quadruple-double in the quarterfinal. So we could see some monster numbers. Let's go on to the BBL semi-finals. Obviously, over 2 legs played at the Morningside Arena this week, Tuesday and Thursday night, starting off, and we get to the top 4. All of this talk about competitiveness, and we still end up with the top 4 at the end of it. Leicester against Newcastle played each other 6 times this year, 3-3 against each other. Obviously, it's at the Morningside Arena. It'll be dubbed as a neutral venue, but Newcastle have won there twice out of the 3 games that they've played. Well, 3 times if you count the cup final as well, where they beat London. It's the old 2 going head to head. This is the old firm matchup, if you like.
Obviously Leicester have to be quite significant favourites. That, despite the fact that they're 3-3, that might sound a little bit counterintuitive. The 2-legged series, I think, does favour Leicester, and I think it favours them because they're more consistent than Newcastle, which means that whilst Newcastle may win a number of quarters against Leicester, you don't see them ever blowing Leicester out in a quarter. Maybe it happened. Maybe it happened in the last game they played.
Third quarter of the last.
Yeah, it did. But you would be a little bit surprised if that happened to Leicester again. Newcastle have been far more up and down this year in relation to their intensity and effectiveness, even within quarters. And you could see a Leicester line getting going when, if, for instance, Gordon's on the bench or something like that, which could put some distance between the 2 teams very, very quickly. So that's why I think they are favourites. I think if it was a one-off, I would say it was a toss-up, because this Newcastle team is, they're 4-3 against London, they're 3-3 against Leicester, and though that's too many games to say that doesn't make a difference, to say that you can't take them into account. And really, the games that separated them in the season, when Newcastle end up losing to Manchester and Surrey and losing to Glasgow, they're irrelevant now. But it'll be Walker's impact will be important. How Newcastle defend Crandall will be important. Whether Newcastle can avoid droughts, and particularly how they get through the minutes without Gordon on the court, are important, because they've struggled in those minutes. He's in the big games. He's been the guy. You'd be wanting him to be playing 36 plus minutes, to be honest. Give them a shot. Whether or not, as I say, they can make enough threes. They're not a great 3-point shooting team. Newcastle, and their defense has been rocky. That's the problem. They've got a rocky defense. It can be very good, but it can be very bad. I think they were 8th out of 11 points per possession in the league. So whether they can sustain enough defense over 2 games to match Leicester is another question. They can certainly do it over 1. We know that, but we have to remember before the third quarter you mentioned, the last league game they played. I mean, Leicester had basically blown them out for 6 consecutive quarters.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because they'd won by 26 in the previous game,
in
and
Newcastle,
they were double figures up at halftime. And actually should have been further away. The way they played that first half, Newcastle won the last
so that's
couple of minutes.
why I suggest that they are favourites. Leicester are weird because they're not a tremendous 3-point shooting team, albeit they look like they are. They get a ton of good looks. Newcastle have actually defended Corey Johnson very well this year. He's struggled against them. If Leicester make threes, they are close to unbeatable, but they don't always make threes, even in their own gym. Will they play 2 games in a row where they miss enough threes for Newcastle to remain kind of close down the stretch? I'm not sure. It's feasible, but I'm not sure. And obviously, it all changes. If someone hits Crandall on the hand and he hurts his hand, I mean, he's still not healthy. So, if Gordon jumps up and twists his ankle, it all changes like that. Yeah. So, I think Leicester would expect to win, but I think they would have preferred to have played Sheffield and Newcastle. If no coach ever says that we would prefer to play this team or that team, apart from Chris Bunton, actually. Yeah. But no coach ever says that. But I think they would have. Well, Sheffield kind of hang around against Leicester. I think Newcastle are a little bit more explosive, and they're a little bit more scary to go against because they are so open. They have been so up and down. So we'll see.
And in the other one, London against Plymouth met 5 times this year, and London have won 4 of them. The one Plymouth win was actually in London, 75-81. They also had an overtime game down at the Pavilions in the Cup, which London won. The one with the biggest margin. Everything has been 5 or 6 points, except the game down in Plymouth after Plymouth had beaten London the week before.
Yeah, I mean, PG will be delighted to know that I think London will win.
There we go. Pin that one
up. Pin that up. The difficulty, I think London are the best equipped team to deal with that lineup that I was talking about, because they have the bodies to pressure LVC, Dusha, and when I say that, we've seen games this year where they've really, really turned the heat up defensively on the perimeter. And
well, they did it early in the year on a televised game that we did, where they were absolutely hammering Plymouth, and they allowed Plymouth back into the game in late on, and it finished up 6. But for the middle 2 quarters of that game, their defense was unbelievably good. And
it starts on the point of attack. It starts on the ball, because and that's a big thing. Also, they have the length on the wings to defend Morsell and McGill, and they have in Parker, and they have a guy who can match up with Hamilton. So it's probably they're probably the one team that have an athletic advantage over Plymouth in the whole league. That said, London should be anybody. So it's not a big thing to say, I think London should win, because London should be anybody. And London's biggest issue has been themselves. It's not really been about what opposition have done to them. It's about whether they are all locked in the right place, because if they are, they should win. Because of the you've talked about, Jules Dangakoda, who's potentially a starting point guard in this league, or at the very least, a high-level third guard in this league. And he's hardly playing. So you've got more centers than you could shake a stick at. So give up, including a guy who can shoot in Shane Walker, a guy who can shoot a lot, Orlando Parker, if you play that, a big guy in Chris Tawaya who can bang away, Farah Ali Hodzic, who's a really solid international quality player, and then Big Kingsley, who's coming in suddenly, he's now 7'1" of pure bulk, and he's with surprisingly quick feet and capability not to foul. So with all of that, and the red hot Dirk Williams, the only team that can beat them is themselves. That said, again, you'd feel better for Plymouth over one leg or over three legs, because London have this spirit ability which is so suited to two-legged basketball, whereby you can destroy a two-legged basketball game in 8 minutes.
Yeah, they could probably do it in 6, to be honest.
Yeah, probably do it in 6. Whereas if it's a one-legged basketball game, they may never do that. In 40 minutes, they might never that run might never come. In 80 minutes, the odds are it's going to come, like it came against Cheshire at the beginning of the first quarter. And in 3 games, maybe the odds are it only happens once, and that gives Plymouth a shot of winning 2 games. So I think the two-legged format suits London. I like their ability to defend Plymouth, and I think there's the difference maker that Plymouth had in eBay is a big one in not having him in this matchup, because you saw how he changed the trophy final in the beginning of the fourth quarter, when he was able to be in there, and he changed shots from everybody.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure that Ocharobia, who's a space filler, and Hamilton and Neighbour are capable of doing that for 80 minutes. It's a hell of an ask for them. Ashley Hamilton, you could argue he's a 3-stroke 4. He's playing the 5. Will Neighbour is he's 6'10", but he's primarily a perimeter guy. He's nobody's idea of a dominant defensive inside presence. And if London spread the floor against them, it's they've got to keep Robinson away, they've got to keep Liggins away, they've got to keep Williams off the 3 points. It's just really tough. That said, McGill has shown that he's not scared of anything, and McGill has shown that he has the chutzpah to and then BJ's playing 40 minutes, so he's playing 80 minutes every game, 8 minutes, 2 legs. He's shown he has the kind of the willingness to compete and to get there. So he is their shot. I mean, London have to find somebody who can defend him. But again, that's a lot over 2 legs to carry a team to that degree. So who knows? Maybe somebody straight. It might be maybe Sentence comes off the bench and gives them 10 points in 10 minutes. Maybe Beastie does the same. Does what he does in the quarterfinal. They're going to need something more than what they just have been running off. That makes sense. It's not going. McGill and Morsell aren't going to win this for them, and on the perimeter. And Hamilton, I think, can take over 1 game. I'm not sure he can take over 2. So, yeah, it's interesting. Interesting to see.
It is, and it'll be on Sky Sports, all 4 games, Tuesday night, 5 o'clock and 7:30, and the same again on Thursday night. Dave and I
tend to prefer televideos coverage.
Dave and I will be doing an extra special post semi-final, pre-final version. So look out for that. It'll probably come on Saturday. We'll see what time we can get together to send that out, but we will do something to reflect on the semi-finals ahead of the final. And I think we're going to leave it there. So thank you very much for listening, and we will see you again at some point next week. Goodbye.